We are good on the sound. YouTube is on. Let's get X on. Let's get Rumble on. Let's get LinkedIn on. Let's get Facebook active. They say I'm now live on Instagram. Let's make sure. And go live. Let's see. We are live on LinkedIn. That is confirmed. Live on Facebook. Confirmed. Live on Rumble and X. Confirmed. Live on YouTube. Confirmed. Instagram, good morning. TikTok, good morning. Today's topic, we're going to talk about what sources I look to when it comes to news. When I want to get information about current events, I share my own, but if I want to get news and information about current events from other individuals, I'm going to tell you what my favorite go-to sources are, and I may source from some of you some ideas. But first, I'm going to tell you what my sources are, why they are my sources, what I like about these sources, and maybe discuss some sources that I don't like also at the same time. So that's going to be the topic here today. I told you all, some of you, actually many of you may not even be familiar with my work, but I have a show that comes out every day. Some of you call this a podcast. I call mine a masterclass. It's called Work on Your Game. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And by the way, speaking of such, if you are following me on any app if you're watching me anywhere other than YouTube right now, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and or to Rumble, because that's where these live streams, when you can always find the replays on my YouTube channel. So if you're not following me on YouTube, those of y'all on TikTok, just click on the link in my profile. You'll see the link to my YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. That one, I think, is the most dependable when it comes to the future of what's going to happen with all of these apps that I stream on. I would put my bet on YouTube and or on Rumble. So make sure you follow me on one of those apps. So I told you all back in episode 1474 of my podcast / masterclass. And by the way, today my show is up to over 3,100 episodes. So this was like, what is that? 1,500 days, let's say about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. I did an episode and I told people to stop watching the news. I told people to stop watching the news because I could see back in 2018 and 2019, maybe even 2017, that what the news was putting out was becoming more and more propagandized by the day. You don't know what propaganda means. It means people who are telling half truths, people who are taking the truth out of context, and people who are just straight up telling you lies. We know the news does that these days. I was saying this back in 2018, and I told people to stop watching the news. And I also told people that if something is actual news, like real news, it will find you. You don't have to go looking for it. At the same time, we all understand that there are current events and there are things that do happen every day, and we want to know what's going on. And also because the news is a attention grabbing mechanism, let's just call it that. When I do these live streams, for example, if I talk about an evergreen topic like mindset or discipline or business, there's a certain amount of attention that draws. Whereas if I decide instead to talk about a current event, something that's happening today, like politics or some type of conflict or Donald Trump or something like that, it draws a lot more attention because people tend to be drawn more towards something that's happening right now rather than something that is maybe an evergreen topic. So I understand why people are in the news and information and current events business, because it draws attention, and you need people's attention if you want to get anything else from them, such as their money and other resources. So I get the whole concept of the news. This is the reason why the news has been around for so long. At the same time, again, the news is no longer trying. When I say the news, what I mean is mainstream media outlets. They're no longer trying to be objective. And one of the reasons that they're no longer trying to be objective, as I've explained many times, they are trying to compete with social media. And when you're trying to compete with social media, you're trying to do the thing that gets people's attention quick and keeps their attention, even if you're no longer following your principle of actually giving people the truth, which is what the news is supposed to be. It's supposed to just tell us factually what's happening. And then you may have some people who want to dive into those facts and find out why the facts are the facts. But the news isn't trying to do that anymore. They're trying to compete with social media. And on social media, our job is not necessarily to give people the facts. The job is to do whatever I want to do, which may be to entertain you, and maybe to anger you, and maybe to make you happy. It might be to just say something that I know is going to get you to react, as people call that trolling. I might be trying to do that on social media. If I'm working on CNN or ABC, however, that's not my job. So the issue with the mainstream media and the way they messed up, thank you for that lightning bolt over there, Medusa, on TikTok. The issue with the mainstream media is that they looked at social media. They noticed that a lot of people who used to be their audience were no longer watching them, but instead they were going to TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And they said, okay, well, what are these people on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube doing? They noticed, and they said, okay, well, let me try to do that. I.e., this is the ABC and NBC and CBS. They decided to start trying to do what social media is doing. The problem with this is that's not what we want them to do. That's not what we want the mainstream media for. If I want to be entertained, I want to watch somebody do a dance or hear somebody just give me their opinion on something, I'll get on social media. If I want to hear the facts and I want to hear objectivity and I want somebody to get to the truth, then I will turn on the news. At least that was the expectation. The problem is the news decided to get out of the business that they were originally in, which is getting to the truth and reporting just straight up facts objectively. And they decided to try to compete with Instagrammers and TikTokers, and they lost because Instagrammers and TikTokers are better at doing what they do than the news is at doing it. And this is why they fail. Thank you for helping me reach 80% of the goal, Medusa. Thank you for those lightning bolts over there on TikTok. So they failed because they tried to play a game they're not supposed to be playing. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that I've noticed a lot of entrepreneurs and professionals make, is that they try to get into a business that they shouldn't be in, or they don't understand what business they're actually in. And the mainstream media made this mistake many years ago. And now they've dug themselves into a hole that is very difficult for them to get out of. So while it is still true that any real news that you need to know about is going to find its way to you to where you don't have to go searching for it, that's still a thing. I'm still a person who likes to know about current events. As you can see in these live streams, if you've watched me before, I like to talk about current events because it draws more attention, and I am in the attention business. It draws more attention to talk about a current event than it does to talk about some evergreen sort of topic. And that's the reason why I like, and also I have opinions on these things and I like to be able to break them down. That's my superpower, being able to break down what seems to be a complex topic and make it simple enough for other people to understand. So saying this up front, I don't consider myself to be a conservative nor a liberal. Hold on, let me send a message really quick. 1 second. So I don't consider myself a conservative or a liberal. I'm not a conservative nor a liberal. I'm not a Democrat nor am I a Republican. When it comes to people being fair, objective, and just analyzing things and just simply logical and breaking things down, you're probably going to notice a certain lean to these sources that I'm going to share with you. I'll tell you this up front, because when I looked at the list myself, I said, damn, it seems like many of these people seem to lean in one direction. And all of you could probably guess what direction that is. And if you can't, then you probably haven't been paying attention. But even though they may lean in one direction, it's not because I personally lean in that direction. I just try to look at things logically and objectively, and I connect with people who do the exact same thing. So that should tell you a lot about what I'm not connected to or where my sources do not lean. It tells you a lot about what that side is doing. So what I'm going to give you is my favorite sources, why they're my favorite sources, and just give you a little bit of what do I want to call it? A context into those. So let me introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dre Baldwin. Many know me as Dre all day. I'm a former 9-year professional athlete, author of 35 books. I've done 4 TEDx talks. I own this company and have this brand called Work on Your Game. What we do here simply is we extract the tools to help athletes reach the top level of the sports world, and we translate those tools over to the professional and the business world. I do that through helping entrepreneurs, transitioning professionals. Maybe you're transitioning out of the military, corporate, government, changing careers, sales teams, people who are looking for some type of mental pick-me-up. I do that in a lot of different modalities: consulting, coaching, speaking, books, courses, etc. You can find out more about that if you just go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Also workonmygame.com. I own that website too. So let's get into it. So number one source, and these are not necessarily in any particular order, but actually they kind of are. So I will say that they are somewhat in a particular order, but they are all, I like all of these sources for different reasons. So number one source that I get for news is X. X, formerly known as Twitter, currently owned by Elon Musk. Now, X was my number one source for news even before Elon purchased it, even though at that time it was heavily liberal and it was leaning heavily to the left. Now, Elon has bought it, and it seems like he came out saying he was a free speech absolutist and it was just going to be straight up and down. But we all know Elon has picked a side politically and that he is MAGA and he's Donald Trump. So if you said that X is leaning a little bit more to the right these days than being straight up and down, then I couldn't argue with that. But X, again, was always my source for news, even before it was X, even when it was Twitter. And for the last 10 years, that's been a place that I go to when I want to know what's going on in the world. I just go on X or Twitter. I see what people are talking about. I see what's trending. I listen to the conversations. I engage in the conversations if I have an opinion. And then I can generally find out what the news is just by going on X. Generally, that's what I do. So Twitter was becoming problematic through its previous ownership regime because they were suppressing a lot of messages that just didn't go with the mainstream narratives, whether that involved Donald Trump and politics and whether it involved the virus. Those two things really exposed Twitter and that regime and the mainstream in general with their messaging and their suppression of certain things that were not factually incorrect. And this is where we can start to get all this misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, fact checking, etc. And some of you may remember this, those of you who pay attention. There was a famous Joe Rogan podcast episode where Joe invited Jack Dorsey, who is the guy who used to own Twitter. He used to run Twitter before he sold it to Elon. And his head of, I don't know what this woman's title was. She was like the head of like security, information, etc. She was basically the lieutenant of the company who decided what information could be posted, promoted, and what information got taken down. I believe her name was Vijaya. So it was her and Jack Dorsey. They were on the Joe Rogan podcast. And Joe also invited Tim Pool. Some of y'all know Tim Pool. He's a white guy. I believe he's based somewhere in the Midwest, and he wears that black beanie on his head all the time. So it was Joe and Tim Pool basically it was a 4-person conversation with Jack and Vijaya, and they were having a conversation about what Twitter's rules are in terms of information, what stays up, what comes down, what are your policies. And these two were basically just talking in circles, Jack Dorsey and Vijaya, trying to defend themselves and the things that they had done. And Tim Pool was basically catching them and calling them out on their nonsense. And it was very obvious that these people were leaning one way while they were claiming that they were just open to free speech and letting people say what they wanted to say. So it was good that Elon purchased the app. And he's come out clearly as a conservative, as I said, and a heavy supporter of Donald Trump. We know that. He's open about it. Everybody knows this. Even though he's those things, I believe the platform is more balanced now than it was. I believe the platform is still more balanced than it used to be because before Elon bought X, and I've been using it since it was Twitter, if you had any type of viewpoint, whether you are a conservative or not, but if you had a viewpoint that supported conservative views, you supported Donald Trump, you supported MAGA or Republicans, that said anything positive, or it was clear that that was your lean, your stuff was getting heavily suppressed on Twitter, just as a general rule, regardless of the topic or regardless of what was happening in the news. And anyone who was pushing left, they were heavily being basically promoted and allowed to thrive. Now, since Elon has purchased, you still have people on the left who are saying what they want to say and promoting their points, and they are still there, still using the app. And we'll get to the people who jumped on the blue sky in a second. And then you have the conservative views, which now get equal billing. That's what happened when Elon took over the app, is that now they get equal billing. A left-leaning perspective and a right-leaning perspective are basically billed equally, and they get seen equally simply because Elon has allowed it to be more fair than it was. Now, what I found interesting and funny, was that after Donald Trump won the election in November, 2 months ago, that a bunch of left-leaning people decided that they were going to leave X, aka Twitter, and join this app called Blue Sky, which I have not used. I haven't downloaded, didn't jump on. And it was a very interesting thing, because the thing about social media, this is the way that I view social media. Maybe not everybody sees it this way. I view social media as a place not just to connect with people who I like and agree with and I'm on the same page as. I view social media as a place where I can find out what's going on. And what's going on, quote unquote, means that I have to hear what people on this side of the conversation are saying, and I need to hear what people on the other side of the conversation are saying. anytime I hear someone express a really strong opinion on any subject, one of the first things that I ask myself, and if I had a chance, I would ask them the same thing, is someone who completely disagrees with what you just said, what would they say, and what is your response to that? Now, if you're a critical thinker, you should have already considered that, and you should have an answer to the question. So if someone on here says you're a really strong supporter of Donald Trump and you are MAGA and you love him, I would ask you, someone who thinks you're an idiot for supporting Donald Trump and they hate MAGA and they want Donald Trump to just disappear, what is their argument for why, and what's your response to that argument? If you're a critical thinker and you're a logical person, you should have an answer to that question. And your answer to the question can't be, well, that person's just dumb and stupid and they're too idiotic. Because see, that's what people on the other side said. That's not logical thinking. That's not critical thinking. Critical thinking is you should have a logical response to anyone who disagrees with your perspective. And that's why I follow people on both sides of any conversation just to find out what they're saying. Even though I may have my own opinion and my own conclusion, I will still listen to people who have a different opinion and a different conclusion just so I can find out what they're saying and what their argument is. And then I can discern, okay, is that argument actually good? Do they have any good points, or are they just saying a bunch of nonsense? But I want to find out. But in order to find out, though, you have to listen to people on every side of a conversation, even if it's not the side that you have agreed with. So what Elon's done, he has balanced the platform out a lot more than it was. Thank you, Paulina, for the rose over there on TikTok. He's balanced this platform out a lot more. And some people are saying, and I was supposed to be talking about Blue Sky. So people were saying when they jumped on Blue Sky, I want to get on a platform that is more just without the dummies who voted for Donald Trump, et cetera. And it was really interesting to me because the people who were jumping on to quote unquote Blue Sky, this other app off of X, all of them were liberals, all of them anti-Trumpers, all of them don't like Donald Trump, not supporting Donald Trump, anti-MAGA, never Trump, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm thinking to myself, those of you who jumped on Blue Sky, now you're just jumping into an echo chamber with a bunch of people who agree with you. What exactly are you accomplishing or learning on that app? Because all you're doing is talking to people who already think the same thing that you think. What's the point? What is the point? What you all got to understand is X, specifically X, is the marketplace of ideas on the internet. That's what it is. If you want to bring your ideas, your beliefs, and your positions to the marketplace and engage with people who may disagree with you and will push back against you, the place where that happens is X. Everybody knows that. That's why everybody was on it, even when it was Twitter. If you left the app just because some outcome happened in the world that goes against your worldview and you consider yourself some form of righteous because you did that, you're a coward, first of all. You're a mental midget, second of all. And why wouldn't you just stay in the marketplace? Just stay in the marketplace and defend your position. Why not do it? Why not just stay in the marketplace and defend your position? If Donald Trump had lost the election, if Kamala Harris had beaten Donald Trump in that election, there is no way in hell I would have left X and stopped talking about whatever it was that I was talking about. And when Donald Trump won, there was no way in hell I was going to leave X and stop talking about whatever it is that I'm talking about. Why? Because first of all, I'm not on a political side. And secondly, I would never leave the marketplace where it's happening if I have an opinion that I want to share. You got to go to where it's at. This is how it works. I told you all, my background is in sports. And when you're an athlete and you think you're that guy or that girl in your sport, in volleyball or swimming or track or whatever, you need to find out where are all the best players in town, the best players where you live, where do they gather, where do they play, where do they train, where do they compete? And you got to go there and you got to prove that you're that guy. So you can't be that guy just hanging out in a small town playing against your bum ass friends. You got to go play against the people who can actually play, and you got to prove you're that guy against the best of the best around. X is the marketplace of ideas. And what the marketplace of ideas means, for those who are not familiar with that term, that means you take your positions, your ideas, your beliefs, your perspectives, you go to a place where other people have other beliefs, ideas, and perspectives, or maybe ones that are similar to yours but better, or completely different from yours, and they will challenge you. And you got to put those ideas out in the marketplace, and we got to see. And you got to go back and forth, and you got to basically duke it out with your ideas, and let's see who has the better idea. That's how it works. And I told you my background is in sports, but I'm also an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, you can't just hide in your house. You got to put whatever you have out into the world and see how the marketplace responds to it. And you have to respond to what the marketplace says to you. The marketplace says, we don't want this product, at least not at this price, and at least not the way you're presenting it. Then you can't just keep saying it and saying, well, the marketplace needs to adjust to me. No, you'll go out of business doing that. You have to adjust to what the marketplace is saying. And it's the same thing with your ideas and your beliefs. The interesting thing I found with a lot of people who were jumping off of X, and these are those who announced they were leaving X. So it's not everybody, bunch of people left X and they didn't announce it. But you all know what happened with Donald Trump. 2016, this happened again in 2020, happened again in 2024, that there were a bunch of people who got self-righteous and they were trying to draw attention to themselves. And they said, if Donald Trump wins, I'm going to leave the country. I'm going to move to Canada. Remember people were saying that in 2016? If Donald Trump wins, I'm going to leave the country. Now, how many people actually left the country? Very few. But when Donald Trump was winning this year, or this last term, 2016, this last cycle, there are people saying, well, I'm going to jump off X. And they were all announcing that they're jumping off. Like, think about that. Let me ask you a question. What is a person? Why would a person announce that they're leaving social media? Why do you make a post announcing that you're not going to post anymore? Because they're just trying to get attention. And these people are, again, mental midgets, emotional weaklings. And there were some of them people who I would follow. I was actively following these people because I just wanted to see what they had to say. I generally disagreed with their positions, but they wouldn't stay in the marketplace of ideas. They wouldn't stay in the marketplace of ideas because they couldn't defend their nonsense, because it's paper thin and based in nothing. It's like the house built on sand. And often these folks, in my experience, many of these folks are academics, and they work in academics, corporate folks, people who work in any type of bureaucracy and the reason why I mention that is because these people work in bureaucracies where if they don't get into the marketplace of ideas, they can still push their ideas, but they push them inside of these inculcated spaces where people have to listen to them and people have to agree with them. And even if someone disagrees with them, they have to disagree with them with a level of decorum that in the open marketplace is not required. So, for example, let's take academics, because I get blocked by academics often on social media, not because I never personally attack anybody on social media. I attack people's points, but I don't attack the person. And I'll attack somebody's point who's an academic. They might be a professor or a PhD or they have a law degree or something like that. And I'll challenge their bullshit and I'll show them that what they said is some bullshit. And then I'll give them the opportunity to defend what they're saying, and they won't engage. Now, the point is they have the luxury of not engaging. See, as an entrepreneur, you don't have the luxury of not engaging with the marketplace. If I put out a product or a book or a course and my customers, my people in my audience say, Dre, we don't like this course, we don't like this product, we don't like this book, I don't have the option of blocking them and never talking to them again. I got to find out why they didn't buy it, because if I can't figure that out and crack that code, I won't make any money and I'll be out of business. Now, see, when you work in academia and you come into the open marketplace and you share an idea and someone like me beats up your trashy idea, you can just go right back to academia. You can just hide in that bubble and live the rest of your life hiding in the bubble. You don't ever have to engage with the open marketplace if you don't want to. See, the issue with these weaklings is that they come into the open marketplace and they're willing to engage as long as things go the way they want them to go. But as soon as things don't go the way they want them to go, they go back and hide inside of their bureaucratic bubbles where they're safe. They're safe spaces. And I've said this many times, there is no such thing as a safe space in real life. So any of you who works in some corporate organization where there's a safe space, all right, you are living in a clown world. All right, you are living in a fantasy. That's not a real thing. If you go to some liberal university where they have a safe space for the LGBTQ or for girls or for black people, you are not living in the real world. In the real world, there are no safe spaces. The real world is a dangerous space, for lack of a metaphorically, that's what it is. Doesn't mean everything in life is dangerous, but it could be. The whole point is real life doesn't have a safe space, meaning in real life, you got to go into the open marketplace and what happens, happens. X is that open marketplace, and that's why it's my number one place when it comes to news. Now, the rest of these are going to be actual people. So the first one was just a platform. Everything else on my list is going to be actual people. So let's move on to number 2. And by the way, I'm going to take questions and comments at the end of this live. So any of you want to get my response to something you have to say, just wait till I get through these points. I think I got 6 or 7 I'm going to list. I'm not going to take this much time on each person. And then I'll answer questions. All right. Number 2. And this could kind of be in order. Number 2 is Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly. And when it comes to people, I think I wouldn't even say I would say she's number 1 when it comes to where I get my news from. I listen to Megyn Kelly's podcast. I think she's on YouTube as well. Almost everybody who has a podcast is also on YouTube. I listen to our podcast damn near every day. Every day that it comes out, I'll listen to it. Now, I don't know when I first came across Megyn Kelly. I don't know where I first heard of her. Some of you may know she's been in the mainstream. She was in the mainstream for many years. I think she was working at Fox. I think she was briefly at NBC. I didn't know who Megyn Kelly was from that. I didn't know who she was or didn't register her personally back in 2015 when she asked the infamous question of Donald Trump. And she said, Mr. Trump, y'all remember this moment? Y'all can find it on YouTube. When Donald Trump was in the Republican primary, and it was like 15 people. And this is when they had live audiences back when they stopped having. You'll notice that the debates, they stopped having live audiences only because of Donald Trump. Y'all know that, right? Only reason they stopped having live audiences during the debate is because of Donald Trump, because he was so good at firing those zingers at his opponents and getting all the crowd on his side. The mainstream media didn't like that Donald Trump was so good at it, so they stopped having audiences. That's the only reason. Like, imagine Donald Trump and Kamala debating with a live audience. He would have destroyed her. But they eliminated the audience to try to eliminate any advantage that Trump could possibly have, even though they're in an election trying to get the people to choose them. But now we're not going to have an audience. It makes no sense. But anyway, so back in 2015, Megyn Kelly was hosting the Republican debate, and it was like 15 people on the dais. And Donald Trump was, of course, drawing all the attention, and there's a big audience. And she starts asking him a question like, Mr. Trump, you have been accused over the years of saying negative things about women, such as calling them pigs and ugly and all these. She started listing all these things. There's a laundry list of things that Donald Trump had either said or allegedly said about women. And the camera's on Trump. And it's funny because he's like making these faces while she's saying it. And then he interrupts her in the middle of the list and he says, only Rosie O'Donnell. And when he said that, the crowd just went crazy. And Megyn Kelly was trying to keep a straight face because he interrupted her and said that. And the crowd just went crazy. And at that moment, he pretty much secured the Republican nomination because no other politician ever would have did that. He secured the nomination in that. And it was still like 15 people trying to run. And that was Megyn Kelly. I'm bringing that up to say I didn't even know who she was back then. I remember that moment, but I didn't pay any attention to Megyn Kelly as a person because at this point, I wasn't paying attention to the news anyway. But I think I first heard of her when someone else on my list that I'll get to later, he mentioned that he had been on her show and then he had her on his show. And then I heard her and I said, I like the way this woman is talking. I think I heard her as a guest on somebody else's podcast. I think that's how I found her. And I listened to how she was talking and I said, okay, this woman she's objective, she's logical, she's articulate, and she's trying to, as fairly as possible, explain what's happening and her position on why it's happening. I said, this is my kind of person. I went and found her podcast and I started listening to her and I've been listening to her ever since. That's how I found Megyn Kelly. And it turns out that her background is actually, she has a law degree. She was a lawyer, I believe, for a brief time before she got into working on TV. So some people who listen to this sometimes ask me if I'm a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on TikTok. I'm not a lawyer. But anyway, I started listening to our show. I've been listening ever since. It's been 2 or 3 years now. And many of you know her, have known her since way before I even knew who she was. But I've only noticed her since she went the independent route. And Megyn Kelly is an actual journalist. Now, the term journalist gets thrown around a lot these days. People calling themselves journalists or trying to defend their points by calling themselves journalists. So I got this many years in journalism, like Don Lemon, people like that. These people are not journalists. A journalist's job, in case any of you didn't know, the job of a journalist is to get to the truth. That's the job of a journalist. If you call yourself a journalist, your job is to find the truth. Your job is not to tell people your personal opinion. You may offer it, but that's not your job. Your job is to find out the truth of a situation, no matter what the truth ends up being, and no matter where that truth might lead. That's journalism. What we get these days is not journalism. What we get these days is a lot of opinionating, of course, and we get a lot of propaganda, which is if you work at CNN, for example, and you find out the truth is going to be something that CNN doesn't want you to say, you won't tell the truth, even though you're still calling yourself a journalist. That's not journalism. Journalism is about telling the truth, whatever it may be, even if it means that some people are going to be mad about it. That's actual. And most people are not journalists these days. Again, most people are propagandizers, especially in the mainstream media. Megyn Kelly is an actual journalist because she is looking to get to the truth, even if it means that one day she has to criticize the left and the next day she has to criticize the right. I listened to her show and I've heard her do it. That's actual journalism. And it's so interesting that there are so few people who are able or willing to do that these days. Many people still call themselves journalists. They're not doing it. So she does a great job of what I like about her platform is that she breaks down the news of the day, whatever the news of the day is. Like yesterday, Pete Hegseth had his confirmation hearing and I listened to the whole thing and she did an episode talking about it. She was actually there, but she wasn't doing it as a report. She was just there. And she breaks it down and she always has a guest on her show. Like every episode, she brings in somebody else who like also talks about the news and talks about current events or whatever it is. So I learn about new people through listening to her because she'll bring him on as a guest. I'm like, I never heard of this guy, but he sounds pretty good. I'll go follow him on social media and stuff like that. So she always has a guest on the show and she has conversation with them. And it's always about the news. It's always about current events. There's no shenanigans. There's no tomfoolery. It's just straight up talking about what's happening and why it's happening. So I'm a fan of Megyn Kelly, and I like the fact she has an independent platform where there's no boss telling her what she can say, what she can't say. She's just keeping it real. And it's interesting that I find, in my experience, I find that she is the most consistent and the most fair journalist out there these days. And I don't know if there's too many men who even fit this description these days, right? Because the second person among us is also a female. Let's continue. So we're talking today about my favorite sources for news. I talked about a platform X. The first source was Megyn Kelly. Source number 2, when it comes to news, this person's a little bit different approach, but similar. Candace Owens. Candace Owens is the next person on my list. Now, the difference between Candace and Megyn Kelly is that Candace Owens tends to be more deep dive, long form, not long form, but long term breaking down of situations. Whereas Megyn Kelly's talking about whatever happened today or just yesterday, and then she breaks it down on that episode. Then tomorrow she's going to talk about what happened that day. Next day she's talking about what happened that day. She's like the news. Megyn Kelly's really like the news, how it's supposed to be. Well, the way it used to be 30 years ago, but it's not anymore independently. Candace Owens is more like an investigative journalist. That's a different type of journalism. Investigative journalism is when you might take weeks or months to break down a situation and find out what's happening. And then you finally come out with, again, 30 years ago, those of you old enough to remember, this person, an investigative journalist, might come out with a 3-hour documentary explaining the whole story that they've been investigating for 6 months. Or if they were writing, they might come out with a 20,000 word column in the Sunday newspaper. That's what Candace Owens does. She breaks things down to the detail and does deep dives on situations. So right now, you've been noticing Candace Owens, if you follow her work, which I do, she is deep diving on the president of France right now and questioning the relationship between he and his wife. And there's a whole deep dive she's doing on that, and they're threatening her, and there's a back and forth. She's been talking about that. But one of the things that she did expertly for something that might be easier for you all to remember was this was October of 2024. She performed surgery on Kamala Harris's background, her heritage, where she comes from. Is she actually from Jamaica, et cetera, et cetera? Y'all remember that? If y'all didn't see that, y'all should look it up on YouTube. Interesting thing about Candace is that she got demonetized on YouTube. So she still has a channel, but she can't monetize her videos. And she did a month straight of diving into Kamala Harris's background, finding birth certificates, trying to source the family tree, all of this stuff. She spent a month straight doing this. And every video she put out was getting over 1 million views within 24 hours. And she couldn't monetize any of it. All right, that's what they did to Candace Owens, because she was saying the wrong things about the wrong people. And she's going at some other people as well that have led to that situation. But one of the things that let me first back up and find out when I first heard about Candace Owens. I don't remember where I first came across her. I do remember Kanye West, when he was still on social media, he posted once on Twitter. He said, "I like the way Candace Owens thinks." And that tweet went like viral because a lot of people knew who Candace Owens was at the time. I don't think I really knew who she was, but I think the first time I heard her, she was just being interviewed somewhere. And she immediately jumps off the screen about her is that she is, again, same thing I said about Megyn Kelly, very articulate, very clear on exactly where she stands, and very good at formulating and defending her arguments. That's the first thing I noticed about her. I said, okay, I don't know who this woman is, but I like her approach. And Megyn Kelly's white, Candace Owens is black, and Megyn Kelly is probably 50. Candace Owens is in her 30s, so she's significantly younger than Megyn Kelly, but similar approaches. And again, one of them black, one of them white. That's when I started liking Candace Owens. Now, at the time, I believe she was working with the Daily Wire, which is the head person that you know, not the head of the company, but the main person we know from Daily Wire is Ben Shapiro. She has some challenges with Ben Shapiro over that conflict that's happening over there. Got to be careful with the names of the countries that I say. And I think that was one of the big reasons why she no longer is with the Daily Wire, and she's independent now. So again, another independent person. And during that presidential cycle, as I said, the one that just passed, she did a deep dive on Kamala Harris's background. And I think that played a significant role in Kamala losing some of her support, especially from black people. Now, she didn't lose all of it. She got 90+% of black female voters. She got, I believe it was either 70 or 80 percentile of the black voters. But when you look at somebody like Barack Obama, it was 90% on both sides. So she lost a significant amount, I think, Candace played a role in that. I don't think Candace is the reason. I think Candace played a role. And as I already told you, she does investigative journalism. So she's not talking about a news item for one day and then moving on. She'll talk about an item for a week straight or a month straight if she needs to and deep dive it. And that guy in France, she is teasing. She's been teasing the last couple of days that she's going to put out a deep dive onto this guy's background. Not him, but actually his significant other is what she's claiming. So she talks about international conflict. She's done long form documentaries. She did one on BLM. If y'all never saw that, it's called The Greatest Story Ever Sold. If you didn't see that documentary she did on BLM, and what she was explaining was where all the money that BLM collected, because that year 2020, y'all remember George Floyd and all that. That year, Black Lives Matter, the organization, took in like $100 million. It might have been, I don't know if it was 100 million or a billion, but it was at least $100 million in donations from all different types of organizations. Candace did a deep dive into finding out where that money went, because they're a 501c3 and they had to put it out where that money went. And she did a deep dive and found out where the money went. If you didn't see the documentary, go find the documentary. There's another one that she did that I can't even remember what she was talking about, but many other subjects she does deep dives. Now, I can see that Candace and Megan don't agree on everything, but I like both of their approaches, and I like they don't agree, because if they all agreed, then I would only need one person on my list. Neither of them, and I'm speaking Candace specifically here, neither of them is beholden to following a certain storyline. And if following a certain storyline means they have to give up the protection of an organization, they're going to walk away from that organization. Candace walked away from Daily Wire, which is a very solid, Daily Wire is a very strong platform. She was willing to leave the Daily Wire because of her conflict with, I believe it was because of her conflict with Mr. Shapiro. And we all know Ben Shapiro's heritage, and we all know who he supports in that conflict happening overseas. And Candace was challenging that group that Ben Shapiro supports. Everybody understand what I'm saying? I got to be careful how I language things on certain platforms here. And she was willing to stand on that at the cost of giving up her position at the Daily Wire. And now she's independent doing her thing. So that's why I like Candace Owens. Moving on. We are talking. Someone said she didn't walk away. She got fired. Okay, fired. Call it that. She got fired. But she knew what she could have done and what she could have stopped doing if she didn't want to get fired. She kept doing it anyway. That I respect, when people are willing to stand on some principles and stand on what they're about, rather than basically swallowing the story. Swallowing the story because you want to keep your job. And that's what a lot of people do. I mean, how many people you saw do that, going back to that virus and going to political things? That's the very point. Moving on, we're talking about people who I look to for news, discussion, and just to hear their perspectives on whatever happens to be going on. Next person on my list is Royce White. Some of you don't even know who Royce White is. Now, Royce White was, interestingly enough, a professional basketball player many years ago. Royce White's probably in his early 30s, so he's not that old. He's a professional basketball player. I believe he played in the Big Three. I think he played in the league in Canada. He was a Big Ten Player of the Year, I remember, many years ago before he came to the NBA. He had a brief career in the NBA, and he's told the whole story of what actually happened in the NBA. Some people said it's because he had anxiety, he was afraid of flying, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole story to that. Not the reason why he's on my list. But I knew who Royce was when he was playing basketball, even though he didn't become famous from basketball. Because when he was playing basketball, I never even heard him speak. I just would see him on the court doing his basketball things. And then after he kind of left the NBA, I generally forgot about Royce White, wasn't thinking about him at all. But what happened is he started to resurface as a guest on some other people's shows, some people who I didn't mention yet that are on my list. And when I heard him on these other people's shows, it caught my attention immediately because my background is in sports. I played basketball. And when it comes to basketball and football players, very rarely do I hear one of them, especially a black guy, who is articulate and compinduous and can make their points and actually sound like they have some level of intelligence. Now, again, if you're not an athlete, I'd be careful of you repeating what I just said. I'm an athlete. I can say that. I've dealt with a lot of football players and a lot of basketball players. Most of them are not very intelligent. They're not very smart. They're not very articulate, and they don't really spend a lot of time reading or thinking. When I heard Royce White, I said, this guy's articulate. He's intelligent. He reads. He thinks. He knows things that you would have to actually open a book to know. He knows stuff. I had not heard too many athletes talk like that. And it immediately got my attention. That's when I started paying attention to Royce. Now, Royce has his own platform. I believe it's called, actually, I know what it's called. It's called Please Call Me Crazy. It's on YouTube, also audio. Usually I listen to stuff on audio. I don't really watch videos that much. And what I like about Royce is that, first of all, he's extremely direct. He gets straight to the point. He does not mince words when it comes to the positions that he holds. And you're going to find that almost everybody on my list fits this description. There's also the description that is, I fit that description. So I tend to lean towards people who are this type of person. And that's exactly how he is. And Royce is a deep thinking individual. He does a really good job of diving into situations and explaining why certain things are a certain way from his perspective. Doesn't mean you always will agree, but from his perspective, he does a great job of diving into it. Now, the difference between him and Candace Owens is that the way a man gets direct and dives into a situation is just different in nature than the way a woman does it. So I believe that what Royce does and what Candace does, there are some similarities, but because one is a man and one is a woman, they just have different approaches and they get to their points in different ways, even though they're not even talking about the same stuff often. And as I said, as a former basketball player, rarely do I run into athletes who can think and articulate their thoughts as deeply as Royce does and as clearly as he does, whether you agree or not. It's not that you have to agree with everything that he says. I want to keep emphasizing that. And Royce actually did get into politics. He ran for office in his state of Minnesota, which is where he's based. He did not win because he was running as a Republican in a state that has leaned Democrat for years. The whole point is sometimes when you run for office, you know you're not going to win based on where you're at, but you do it anyway just to get your platform out there and get your name out there. So that's pretty much what he's done. And he still does his show. Now, he's a guy that, again, if you're a type of person who just wants to hear things on the surface, you just want to hear about what happened and what people think about it and move on, Royce is not for you. He's not going to be your cup of coffee because this guy is a deep diver. Again, whether you agree with him or not, he does deep dives into the subjects and explains. He gets into, I remember he was on this other person's show who I'll get to in a moment. And his other person's show was much more closer to the surface. And he was on that other person's show and he was explaining. And anytime he would get asked a question, he would start diving like 8 levels deep to where I'll tell you something about me. I listen to a lot of stuff that I consume. When I listen to YouTube videos, it's always on 2x speed. When I listen on Spotify, like Joe Rogan, I put it on 2.5, 3x. I just finished listening to an audiobook this morning. It was on 3x speed. I can consume a lot of material at faster speeds because as long as they're speaking native, English speakers, I can consume a lot of material pretty quickly and understand what they're saying and digest it. When I listen to Royce White, sometimes I got to stop and rewind, just not because I didn't hear what he said, not because he's talking too fast, but because he goes so deep that I got to rewind it and say, wait a minute, let me hear what he just said, because that kind of went, sometimes it goes over my head. And I think I'm a pretty smart guy. Sometimes I hear Royce say things and I'm like, wait a minute, that one I didn't catch. I got to listen to that one more time. Let me slow it down so I could really understand what he just said. There are very few speakers who cause me to do that. Royce is one of them that does that. This is a guy that takes you into the deep water. So if you want to go deep, he's a guy you should listen to, again, just to hear what he has to say, whether you agree with it or not. Moving on, next person on my list. We're talking about my sources for news, who I like to listen to for news. It doesn't matter what number is. Next, Jason Whitlock. Now, Jason Whitlock is more of a sports guy. So if you're not into sports, you wouldn't know Jason Whitlock. And you'll probably not be interested in his approach. Now, Jason Whitlock is a sports guy. He is a sports journalist. He was a sports journalist for many years. He still does journalism, but now we know all the journalists are doing it through video and audio. So he was doing sports journalism for many years. I was reading Jason Whitlock back in the probably 25 years ago. I was reading Jason Whitlock. So he used to write for ESPN. He used to be on this TV show called The Sports Reporters, which actually used to be a good show back in the days. I don't know if it even still exists, but is not what it was. ESPN is just trash now, but he used to be on The Sports Reporters every now and then. He would be on Pardon the Interruption with Tony Kornheiser, Mike Wilbon a few times, and he wrote for ESPN. He would write columns on ESPN Page 2 back when ESPN had actual good writers and they put out actual quality written content. They used to have a lot of really good writers at ESPN. Jackie McMillan, Rick Bucher, Mark Stein, Ralph. What was that guy's name? I'm forgetting his last name. There was a guy named Ralph. He passed away. They had Jackie McMillan. They had Bill Simmons. They had Jason Whitlock. You could be on ESPN and actually read quality writing back then. Not anymore. But anyway, I remember reading Jason on Page 2. ESPN used to have this section called Page 2 where the background was yellow. Those of you who read and you remember the sports world, you remember this. And I did not always agree with the things that Jason wrote about. I could tell that he had a very conservative point of view before we were calling it conservative. I don't know what we called it back then. In 2005, 2005, what were we calling people who had his view? We weren't calling it conservative. I don't know what we called it. We would call it just old school. He just had this old school view. And I remember he wrote this column that I still remember to this day. When the NBA had their All-Star game in Vegas, I believe this was 2000, maybe 6 or 7. NBA had the All-Star game in Vegas. And Jason went to the event in Vegas to write about it and write his column. And he wrote a column about the All-Star weekend in Vegas, and he called it the Black Super Bowl. And that was not it wasn't a compliment. He was basically trashing, Black culture and hip hop culture, what we call quote unquote Black culture, because there's a lot of different things that could define Black culture. He basically trashed hip hop culture and Black culture. And the frame that he was using was what he saw in Vegas that weekend. Because a lot of Black people went to NBA All-Star weekend. And you got the girls there, you got the guys there, and everybody showing off and all that. He wrote an entire column basically trashing the hip hop culture that he believed influenced what he saw in Vegas. And I remember he would constantly trash rap artists and gangster rap music. And this is during the time period where I'm listening heavily to gangster rap music, Jay-Z, 50 Cent, etc. And I remember he would reference those guys by name and talk about them and say kind of stuff these people rap about has led to the decline in the Black community, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember reading it because I was a big fan of 50 Cent's music at that time and completely disagreeing with his conclusions and thinking that he was kind of sounding like a hater of rap music and Black culture, kind of, not in an emotional way, but sounding like a hater. But I still read the column and I said, this guy actually does have good points, but I don't want to agree with his points because I like the music that he's trashing, but I understood where he was coming from. I understood his perspective even then, because again, I try to be as objective as possible. Even if I'm disagreeing with someone's perspective, if I can understand where it's coming from, I can still respect it. So I remember him trashing that, and he has stayed true to that approach while continuing to leverage what he does now is he leverages people's fascination with sports and athletes. And he talks about bigger picture things. And he talks about sports at the same time. So if you listen to his show is called Fearless. Also, the same as everybody else, is on YouTube, is also on audio. I tend to listen to the audio. He'll talk about sports topics. So he'll talk about the NFL playoffs or what's happening in basketball. But he will also talk about bigger picture stuff like Donald Trump. And he'll talk about the conservative movement because he has declared himself conservative and declared himself MAGA. But he's had these conservative views for decades, as I just explained to you. Even before it even mattered, politics weren't that hot button of an issue, that much of a hot button issue 20 years ago. Now everybody has an opinion on politics, whereas 20 years ago, there was still politics, but we weren't really, it's not like everyday people were arguing about it. Now people argue about it, everyday folks, and a lot of people don't know shit, but still talking about it. So Jason Whitlock, I believe, is the person who introduced me to 2 other people on this list. He definitely introduced me to Royce White, or reintroduced me, because he had Royce on his show. And when Royce would talk on Jason's show, I said, I haven't heard an athlete be able to go this deep on anything. That's how I got interested in Royce. And I believe it was Jason who said he had got invited to be on Megyn Kelly's show. And then I heard Megyn and I said, I like her. And I added Megyn to my list of people who I listen to. So I believe it was Jason who introduced me to both of these people. Now, the thing I say about Jason Whitlock, as I already told you, he's a sports guy. So half of his material, 60-70% of his material, I would even go as far as to say, is sports based. So if you're not into sports, then he's not your guy. But if you're into sports, his approach and the things that he talks about is he's one of the few people who has a conservative worldview who talks about sports. A lot of sports, we know, and I'm talking the biggest mainstream sports. So let's just say football and basketball. Those are the ones that I know the most about and know the most of the athletes, know who most of the athletes are. They're mostly Black guys, right? Young Black guys. The people who talk about those sports tend to have liberal viewpoints. Now, if those are their real viewpoints, we don't really know. This has been the whole point. This is the challenge of mainstream media, is that if you're going to work at a company like ESPN, you can't just go around having conservative viewpoints and expressing them and keep your job. It's not possible. You won't keep a job there if you have 2 strong conservative viewpoints. You've seen people who had conservative viewpoints at ESPN, they end up not working there anymore. Sage Steele is one. Will Kane was another. Jason Whitlock's another. He worked at ESPN twice and ended up out of ESPN because he had conservative viewpoints. And the thing is, he is one of the few people in the sports world talking conservatively and talking about sports and doing so openly. And what happens is he gets, let's say, targeted or verbally attacked by a lot of people in the sports space, whether the athletes or the people who talk about the athletes, the other talking heads on TV and podcasts, and they say, well, a lot of people in the sports space don't like this guy. Like Stephen A. Smith's the guy that Jason Whitlock pretty much, he performed a little bit of surgery on Stephen A. Smith, not the same way that Candace does, but he dove into Stephen A. Smith's book and basically declared that Stephen A. Smith was lying about a lot of things that he said in his book. Stephen A. Smith did a whole episode trashing Jason Whitlock and saying that he's a bad guy and nobody likes him, et cetera, et cetera. And then a bunch of people have mimicked that talking point. Well, a lot of people in the sports space don't like this person, so that must mean they're a bad person. I don't necessarily believe that to be true. That's an example of the bandwagon fallacy. Bandwagon fallacy states that if a bunch of people think one thing, then it must be true. Or if a bunch of people don't like something, it must be bad. Not necessarily. It might be a bunch of people are sheep and they're just following whatever they've been told. Doesn't mean that thing is necessarily good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad just because everybody else said it. So because of his positions and the things that he's willing to say, people have demonized and attacked him. But for me, I appreciate it because there should be somebody saying it. There should be more than one person who has a conservative worldview talking about sports on a daily basis. Why is there only one? I don't see, actually, I'm not going to say he's the only one. There are several others, but especially black people. I don't see a whole lot of black folks sharing conservative worldviews talking about sports, because a lot of the sports are on the liberal leftist lean. I mean, you saw the NBA during 2020 when they had the bubble, that they had the BLM, Black Lives Matter, on the courts. They put that on the court. They had guys taking knees during the national anthem. The NBA is a heavily liberal organization. We know this. The NFL actually is based in conservative values, but their leadership is pushing liberal points, which makes no sense. NFL is a very conservative business. The owners of the NFL teams are conservatives. Almost all of them are heavily conservative. NBA, you have more owners who are actually liberals, and these leagues are the owners. That's the league is whoever owns it all collectively makes the league. The NFL is extremely conservative in terms of their leadership, their owners, and the NBA is much more liberal in terms of their leadership and their owners. But they both, on the surface, are pushing liberal perspectives because that's kind of, it seems like what they think they need to do. Why we don't have more people talking conservatively when there are half the country, as we can see by the outcome of the previous election, the previous 3 elections, half the country is conservative. So how is it that only a handful of people in the sports space are expressing conservative views when half the country is conservative? It doesn't even add up, right? It doesn't make sense. This is how you know a lot of these mofos are lying, and they're fronting and they're saying whatever their bosses tell them to say in order to keep their jobs. They are not willing to keep it real. So the people who I am telling you that I like on these lists, these are people who are willing to keep it real. And that's why I like them, because they're willing to say things that right now, when it comes to the mainstream, you can't say and keep a position. And this is why most of the people on my list tend to have a conservative lean, simply because you can't keep it real, be conservative, and have a job in the mainstream. These people all are working in independent platforms. Jason is with The Blaze, which is independent in itself, and he has a show on there called Fearless. But people who are just willing to share something that maybe it appears they're going against the grain when they're really not. Honestly, if you think about it, if half the country, more than half the country, voted for Donald Trump, right? And Donald Trump is a Republican, a conservative, then actually conservative is the grain. Isn't that correct? More than half the country voted for Donald Trump. So that means conservative is the grain, and being liberal actually is going against the grain. It technically, but the way that it's framed, and we all know this, that being liberal is the actual grain, and being conservative is you're the one who's standing out and going against what everybody else, quote unquote, everybody else is going with. Well, let's continue. Next on my list is a handful of people who I don't listen to on a consistent basis, but I do like their stuff when it pops up. So one of them is AJ. I don't know if I can say that guy's name because he's been attacked on a lot of platforms. AJ, the white guy who's kind of chubby with the bald head and a gruff voice, that guy, AJ, that y'all know who he is, InfoWars guy. Then you got Tucker Carlson and also Steve Bannon. All right, these guys I like listening to all of them. Tucker Carlson doesn't really talk so much about himself. He's more of an interviewer and does it in a journalistic way. Then you have AJ, who says a whole lot of things that some of them you may agree with, some of them you may not agree with, but he has a lot to say, and he's been right more than he's been wrong. We got to be honest about that. And he's very provocative in the things that he says and that he does. We all know that. And then Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon was a strong supporter of Donald Trump, still is a strong supporter of Donald Trump. to this day. Now, again, these guys, I don't listen to them on a consistent basis, but if something of theirs pops up, I'm going to listen. And all three, I don't know about AJ. I don't know if he's been on, but Tucker and Steve Bannon have both been guests on the Megyn Kelly show. So I've heard them there as well. And same thing with all three of them. They are all articulate. They're all able to express their positions and why they have their positions very well. I like people who are very articulate, people who can explain themselves. And I'm packaging them all on this point because, as I said, none of them is a regular listen, but they are really good when I do hear them. So one thing I'll say about Steve Bannon is that the guy's a great political strategist. You have to give him credit for that. And if I was running a political campaign, he's one of the first people I call and say, hey, can you help run my campaign? Can you help me? Because this guy knows strategy. He knows how to do his thing. And the funny thing is, he was on the Trump team in 2015, 2016. And when Megyn Kelly asked that question during the debate, Donald Trump took offense to the question, and he felt like Megyn was trying to set him up to fail. So he started attacking Megyn Kelly, and Steve Bannon organized an entire attack on Megyn Kelly. They got a bunch of MAGA supporters to start attacking Megyn Kelly for asking that question. So Megyn Kelly and Steve Bannon were at odds for many years, but then they got cool. Now they settled it, and everything is all good. But Steve Bannon is a political bulldog. That's what I'll say about him. The guy's a bulldog. If you're running a campaign, you probably want this guy on your team. And if you have a political opponent, you probably don't want Steve Bannon helping your opponent because he's a bulldog. This guy, he just goes after it. So he's very articulate, clear on his positions and opinions, appears to be looking to get to the truth of situations that he discusses. And if you fit that description, again, it gets my attention. So with all that said, I am looking for, because I've asked people this, I said this on X maybe a month ago. I'm looking for people who may lean to the left that are fitting the description of what I've described here. People who are articulate, people who are trying to be as objective as possible. They are logical in the way that they make their arguments, and they just happen to lean to the left. I have a hard time finding these people. That's the issue. I've had a hard time finding them. So I'm going to tell you a couple suggestions that I was given because I'm clear. I know that my list tends to lean to the right. The problem is it leans to the right because this is when I'm looking for someone who's objective, logical, articulate, and trying to get to the truth. They all seem to be conservatives. So are there any liberals who fit this description? If there are, please tell me their names. I'm looking for them. So someone said Joe Rogan. Okay, Joe Rogan's a liberal, but Joe Rogan doesn't, he interviews. So I do listen to Joe Rogan. I didn't put him on my list, but yes, Joe Rogan definitely hits the description. I do listen to the Joe Rogan show. So Joe Rogan is fine. Some people told me the Young Turks. I haven't really listened to them a lot, but I've watched a couple videos of the Young Turks, and there's those two people is what? Anna and Sink. Is that how you say his name? Sink. So I've heard a couple videos of the Young Turks. They are on my list of people to pay a little bit more attention to. Someone said Glenn Greenwald. That was another one told to me. Is Glenn Greenwald a left? Is he left? Is he liberal? I don't know if he is. I didn't know if he was liberal. Glenn Greenwald. I have heard him on Megyn Kelly, and I like his approach. There's Victor Davis Hanson. I've heard him on Megyn Kelly. I don't know if he's leftist, but I've heard him on Megyn Kelly, and I like. Someone says Sam Harris. I have heard some Sam Harris stuff and liked it, but there's other things I've heard from Sam Harris, and I'm like, this guy is out of his mind. One of the things I heard Sam Harris say was, someone said that what someone had said to me was, Sam Harris, when he's on, he could be the best, and when he's off, he could be the worst. And that's what I would say about Sam Harris. I heard Sam Harris say that it was okay. I'm paraphrasing. He was saying it was okay to tell lies about Donald Trump just to make sure that he didn't win. I said that I can't get with somebody who says something like that. Like, that's nonsense. And he says something to that effect. I can't get with Sam Harris just on the basis that he would say something like that, because that means he's putting his emotions in front of his objectivity, and you're not a journalist. As soon as you start doing that, you're not doing journalism anymore. So Sam Harris is a maybe. Someone said Joe is a libertarian. Okay, fair enough. But I've heard Joe say that he is or was a liberal. Maybe that was years ago. Maybe he's changed his position. I appreciate that Joe offered both Trump and Kamala to come on his show during the 2024 election cycle. That was a mistake by Kamala to not go on the show. And I understand why she didn't do it, because had she gone on there and had to have a long form conversation with Joe Rogan, I don't know what the hell she was going to say. So I say it was a mistake for her to not do it, but I also understand why she didn't do it. And I also believe her not doing it was part of the reason why she didn't win. But she needed to go on that show and just express some humanity and some people skills. And I think maybe she didn't have them. was why she didn't go on the show. But at the same time, I heard her not go on the show. All that said, let's get to the comments. If you got a comment for me, go ahead and post it in the comments in a moment. TikTok, wait a minute. Brittany, thank you for moderating as usual over there. Brando Smith over on YouTube said, you like Royce's approach as well. Shout out to Royce White. Let's see what we got over on. I don't think I saw a comment on Instagram while I was talking. Yes, I did get. Phil said, can someone without an affiliation or bias to the two-party system be a trusted source for media? An example being an individual from the Green Party. Absolutely. Phil, absolutely. Yes, they can. If there is someone, please tell me their names. I would love to follow them. When I hear of someone who I believe is, again, logical, objective, they are trying to get to the truth. I don't care where they lean. If they're these three things and they are articulate and able to explain their perspective, I want to follow them. I want to listen to them. I want to hear what they have to say. I'll look up a couple of their YouTubes or their podcasts or follow them on X and just see what they're saying and see if it's actually true. I don't care where they lean. The problem that I found is that all the people I find who fit this description, logical, objective, articulate, trying to get to the truth, they all seem to be conservative. And again, the Young Turks, I'm giving them a chance. I don't know if Glenn Greenwald is even liberal or conservative. I heard him and I like his approach. I don't know if he's liberal or conservative. And who else? I haven't found anybody. Joe Rogan, I put him in a different category because he's mostly interviewing. It's not like he's just sitting there telling you what he thinks. He's interviewing other people and letting them talk. But I appreciate the fact that he's even willing to offer his platform to people who may be on the conservative side. And another thing about Joe Rogan, I should have put him on the list actually, that I appreciate is that during the virus, Joe Rogan was willing to offer an interview to a bunch of doctors who were going against the grain of telling everybody to take the jab. They were coming out and saying, no, you shouldn't because, and they were offering that. And these people were being completely stripped of everything that they had earned professionally because they were going against the grain of what everyone was telling you to do when it came to that jab for the virus. And Joe Rogan was allowing these guys to be interviewed on his platform and offering them a very big space to say what they want to say. So I do appreciate Joe Rogan for that. He's willing to at least have a conversation with someone on either side of the aisle. So Joe Rogan should have been on my list. So glad y'all brought up Joe Rogan. So all that being said, TikTok, we over here with comments. So Brittany, you see something good, just go ahead and pin it. Let's get to it. Paulina, thank you for the rose. Thank you, everybody who hit me with the gifts and the goals over here on TikTok. Appreciate you guys. TCS 800 said, that is wise. I don't know what you're referring to, but thank you. Suds Verse said, I like your thinking. Yes, any medium that is only one side is an echo chamber. That's correct. So again, all these people jumped over to Blue Sky just so they can talk to other liberals. What sense does that make? What are you going to learn in that conversation? Nothing. Joseph Fisher said, I love your logic. Thank you. Kiwan said, oh, they wasn't talking to me. All right. Lee and Lisa said, X is the medium now. Citizen journalism. Yes, is that what we call it? Citizen journalism? I'm good with that. And yes, X is the medium now. And that's the reason why Elon bought it. So some people have commented that, well, Elon bought X and they're not making any money. I don't think it, actually, I know Elon did not buy X to make money. He bought X so he could have more control over, more say and control over how the media works. And I think it's working. Resisting Always says, X is an echo chamber. The only ideas brought forth on X are how to execute insurrection. All right. I mean, I see you're being sarcastic, but no, X is not an echo chamber. I disagree. X is not an echo chamber. X, it was heavily to the left when what's the guy's name? Dorsey owned it. Elon bought it and has shifted it more back to the center. Now, Elon is himself to the right. But at the same time, he is still allowing people who are on the left to say what they got to say. I follow a bunch of people who are on the left on X, and their stuff still gets promoted. They still get viral posts. They still have posts to get millions of views, and they're on the left, staunchly on the left. Even people going against Elon get a whole lot of likes and engagement on X. So, no, I can't say it's an echo chamber. I would reject that position. Joseph said, you become out of touch if you disconnect. That's right. Lee and Lisa says, so many announcing departures. Yeah, I mean, people do that all the time. I remember back in 2016 when Trump was running before the election, a bunch of people on Facebook were copy pasting the same post. They said, if you're going to support a person who is, and then they did the laundry list of all the negative things about Trump, then we can't be friends anymore. I don't hate you, but we can't be friends. So please unfriend me on Facebook. I said, you fucking idiots. And these are people who I know personally. I'm like, you guys sound like idiots, sound like children. If you're going to vote for Trump, don't be my friend anymore. Like, really, that's really like people say that in preschool. All right, you're going to vote for Trump, don't be my friend. Anyway, Elias says, same thing they said about Biden. How many left? LMAO, two sides of the same coin. Did people say they're going to leave the country if Biden won? I don't think not as many. Not as many as on the other side. My handle on X is Dre All Day. Dre All Day is my name on X. And if you just type my name in, my actual name, Dre Baldwin, DreBaldwin, on any social media app, my picture will come up. I'm easy to find. Big Bank Hank said, I don't tell anyone my plans. That's a good idea. Lisa said, why the Department of Education must be defunded. Yeah, I did a whole live on that. I might talk about it again if it comes up as a news item again. DJ Blockchain said, LinkedIn is the Wild West right now, and people are there to do business. Too much noise on X. Yeah, LinkedIn is more of a business place. I don't put that in the group with all the other social medias. June, no safe spaces. That's correct. Over on Jaminjo said, love this fella. Thank you. What are you talking about? Over on Instagram, J Step says, in your opinion, do you think that more people in today's society are seeking truth? I feel that a lot of people in organizations are now being exposed. Well, the thing is, people need to understand what truth actually means. I think a lot of people consider themselves seeking truth. They don't even know what it means. Truth means all the facts in full context. That's what truth is. Truth means you need to gather all the facts, not just the ones that you like. And you can't just pick and choose which facts to share. This is how people lie to you with facts. So be careful when someone tells you that they're giving you facts, because I can pick and choose facts. The truth is all the facts and all the context that connects each fact to the other facts. That's what the truth actually means. That's what journalism is supposed to be. What it's become is people picking and choosing the facts that they want to tell you about, and then using those facts to paint a picture that they want you to see based on their leanings and based on their personal opinions. That's not journalism. So let's just say a situation has 25 facts. If I only show you 5 of the 25 facts, I'm not being journalistic and I'm not giving you the truth. I'm just giving you facts. And the facts are true, but they're not the truth. There's a difference. And whenever someone says, well, I'm giving you the facts, how are people ignoring facts? Well, it's not that people are ignoring facts. They're asking, where are the rest of the facts? Tell me the whole story. It's kind of like if you have a child, you got a 4-year-old child, and they're at the park playing, and they come crying to you and say, hey, that kid over there hit me. Well, they're giving you a fact. Well, what they're not telling you is the truth, which is your kid hit that kid first and the kid just hit them back. See, they didn't tell you that part. See, they left out the fact that would have made them look bad, and they only gave you the fact that makes them look like a victim. And this is what adults do. They leave out the facts that would condemn themselves, and they only tell you the facts that make the other side look bad. And what we need to do as citizens is you must have a discerning eye to notice when people are only telling you the side that makes one thing look one way, but they're not telling you the rest of the story. And that's the issue. So, for example, Jack Smith. I know this guy, Jack Smith, the special counsel, i.e. prosecutor, who was brought on to try to get Donald Trump. And he just resigned and his whole case fell apart. So he put out a report the other day that said, in his report, he concluded that we had enough evidence to convict Donald Trump of whatever, if this had gone to trial. The only reason it didn't go to trial is because Donald Trump's lawyers tried to delay the case. That's what he said. That's what Jack Smith said. And a bunch of people on the left, they're still on X, so we can't say X is an echo chamber because I was engaging with a bunch of these people yesterday. They were saying, oh, well, look at this. Jack Smith put out a report. Donald Trump would have got convicted if he didn't delay the case. First of all, a couple things. Number one, Jack Smith is a prosecutor. So, of course, a prosecutor is going to say, I would have won my case. I mean, that's this damn job, is to win cases. The prosecutor's job is to get convictions against whoever they go against. So a prosecutor saying I would have won my case is the same as if one of Trump's defense lawyers would have said we would have won the case. All right, it's not proving anything. They're only telling you half the story. And the other thing is they said, well, Jack Smith is saying, well, the only reason we couldn't do it because Donald Trump kept delaying the case. That's ridiculous. The only reason the case didn't come out until 2024 is because they held it to try to make him look bad so he couldn't run and win the election. And it failed. So everything Jack Smith did was a complete failure. They put out this report as a way to cope and give themselves some type of quote unquote, moral victory after everything that they did failed. And again, that's just an objective observation. This is not, I'm not speaking as some type of Trump supporter or MAGA or conservative, just objective observation. The charges that they had against Trump were from files that he kept at his house when he was president. When he stopped being president, 2020, they could have been charged him. Then they said it was because of the quote unquote insurrection. When was the insurrection? 2021. Why did they wait till 2024 to make a case out of it? Because they were using it as lawfare to stop Trump from being able to run for president. That was the entire point. So for him to say, for Jack Smith to say in his report Well, the only reason why we couldn't convict Trump is because his lawyers delayed the case. That's bullshit. They delayed and held on to the evidence that they allegedly had just so they could use it against him to stop him from running for president. But they didn't tell you that part. Now, see, is that in his report? Any of you read the report? Is that part in the report? Even if you didn't read it, do you think it's in there? Of course it's not in there. Because that's a fact that he left out. So you got to be careful when people are telling you they have facts, because they'll tell you the facts that they want you to know while omitting the facts that they don't want you to know. And that, what I just told you, is a bigger picture of the truth. See, you only have the truth when you have all the facts. And here's the thing you should understand about human beings is that any human being telling you facts that make it seem like they did nothing wrong and they're completely innocent and everything is against them, they're lying to you. 99% of the time, they're lying to you. Because no human being is perfect and every situation has flip sides to it. So anyone telling you a story that makes it seem like they did absolutely nothing and everybody else is being bad, they're lying. They're lying because they know they're leaving out certain facts. The truth is all of the facts. So to answer your question here, J-Step, you asked a short question. I gave you a long answer. The question you asked, are more people seeking truth? My answer is many people think that they're seeking truth, but they don't even know what truth is. So what they're doing is asking themselves the wrong question. So I just explained to you what truth actually is. Most people don't. If you ask most people, what does it mean to tell the truth? What they're going to give you is some form of, oh, well, I got all the facts. Well, you don't have all the facts. You got some of the facts. And the other thing, J-Step, is that most human beings are much more emotional than they are logical. I tend to be a super logical individual. And when people are emotional on a subject, they tend to gravitate towards any fact that confirms their emotions. For example, if you hate Donald Trump and someone gives you a fact that makes Donald Trump look bad, you don't need to hear any other facts because you hate him already. So any fact that makes him look bad, you will run with it without even asking yourself, are there any other facts that would disconfirm the fact that I just heard? See, if you hate Donald Trump, you won't even ask for that. So you think you have the truth when you actually don't. You have an isolated fact that was pulled out of context. And that's the definition of propaganda. Propaganda is facts out of context, truth that is not the full truth, half truths, and straight up lies. That's the definition of propaganda. So anytime someone gives you a fact that is pulled out of context, they're propagandizing. That report that Jack Smith put out yesterday is the definition of propaganda because it doesn't tell you all the facts. It tells you the ones that he wants you to know. It doesn't make him a bad guy. It means he's doing his job. His job is to make Trump look bad. That's his job. Now, Trump's job is to counter that. This is the game. And this is the reason why, if you get in politics, you need to understand this is a very nasty game that they play. If you saw the Pete Hegseth confirmation hearing yesterday, you understand this is a very nasty game. This is not for the faint of heart or the thin-skinned. If you're thin-skinned, never ever get into politics. You will run home crying the first day and you won't come back. John One said he's an entertainer, not a leader. Who are you talking about? Trump? I think both. You can't say he's not a leader when he got half the country to vote for him 3 times. You can't say somebody's not a leader. They did that. Me and Lisa said that wasn't the important part with Megan. DJ Blockchain. No, it wasn't talking to me. Gabriel said, you don't have to be a drifter to be cool. I don't know what that means. What are you talking about? Gabriel said, what about Fox? And what about Fox? Fox is mainstream. I don't follow any mainstream news outlets. Slim Reaper said, Megyn Kelly is top notch. I agree. Megyn Kelly is very good. Frenchie said, people talk about accountability, but hypocrites. Well, technically, Frenchie, if we were keeping it all the way real, every human is a hypocrite in some way, depending on how you define the term. You call anybody a hypocrite. If they change their mind about something, then you can say, well, you're a hypocrite because you thought this, now you think that, and somebody will call you a hypocrite just based on that. Technically, it doesn't make you a hypocrite, but people will call it that. Phil said, truth and knowledge start with good epistemology. What do you mean by that? KB said, I love Megyn. So clearly Megyn got a lot of fans. Yeah, I like Megyn Kelly. Very good. DJ said, I just looks up who you're talking about. Free country, I guess. Who was I talking about? Mike Lowry, I see what you did there. Nice try. Corey said, Kim Iverson is pretty good too. I've heard that name, but I've never really heard her talk. Tori said, her deep dives are a joke. How? Troy Foreman said, you talking about Candace Owens? Her deep dives are a joke? How are they a joke? If you saw her BLM documentary and you saw how she died in the Kamala Harris's background, how could you call those a joke? I'm not saying you have to agree, but you can't call it a joke. She did surface a whole lot of information that we otherwise did not know. That absolutely happened. Again, you don't have to agree with her conclusion to respect the work. And again, this is exactly what I mean. What I just told you all about truth and facts. Many people are so emotionally engaged in a certain position that when they hear something that goes against their emotional engagement, they just outright try to blanket discredit the entire thing. And this is a human nature thing. It has nothing to do with the quality of the material. This is just human nature. So what Troy Foreman just said here is exactly what I mean. 007, you're a smart man. I like you. Thank you. Then Troy told me I'm clueless. Yeah, okay. Right. Monica said, you must be the only one that like her. No, because all you know who she is. So she got to have more fans than just one. I just told you her videos are getting 1 million views every day. So 1 million, that means it's 999,999 other people who were listening to what she had to say. Now, I think some of them might like her. Now, maybe some of them were just hate watching, but I think some of them might like her. What do you think? What do you think, Monica? DJ Blockchain said BLM was spanned the original meaning of BLM. And you name an act that I don't know about. It was spanned in the media to bury the original meaning. What's the original meaning in BLM, DJ? DJ Blockchain, what's the original meaning of BLM? And I got to challenge you on that point, but I want to find out what you say the original meaning is, and that may be the crux of where there's disconnect here. Trizzy said, need a new tie? No, don't. This tie is great. I got a bunch of ties. I got more ties than I got closet space for. I got a lot of them. 007 said, you're a smart guy. You're going to make it in journalism. I'm not a journalist. I'm an entrepreneur. But I do try to get to the truth. But I am not a journalist. I'm not trying to work for a newspaper or anything like that. Trizzy said, lost me on Candace Owens LMFAO. All right. What is your issue with Candace Owens, Trizzy? Tell me what your issue is. So there's an interesting thing with Candace Owens is not what Candace Owens says, is the fact that she's black and saying it. That's the issue many people have with Candace Owens. Candace Owens is not that different from Megyn Kelly. See, if Candace Owens was white doing what she did, then people would not have such strong opinions about her. A lot of the strong opinions about Candace Owens are black people who don't like that she does deep dives on other black people or black things that many black people believe that they're supposed to go along with just because they're black. And that's one of the things that I respect about her. She knows that she is going to get attacked by black people just because of what she looks like and the things that she says. If she was white saying the same thing, she would not get the same level of blowback. And if she stayed black and supported these things, she would have a whole bunch of fans because she got the skill. She has the verbal skill to where she would be a superstar celebrity celebrated by everybody if she was liberal. If Candace Owens was liberal, she'd be like, I don't know, who's a really famous person talking about the news? Candace Owens would be like Oprah if she was liberal. But she's conservative, so she gets attacked by black people. But with her skill set, she'd be Oprah Winfrey if she was liberal. So most of the people pushing back against Candace Owens, I guarantee all these people are black. You don't see any white people having a problem with Candace Owens for the most part. And if they are white, they're something else in addition to being white. They have the letter J. Those are the people who don't like her because of what she said about that country with the letter I. Phil said, epistemology is what critical thinking and logic sits on, is the foundation. Critical thinking and logical is the house. All right, fair enough. I don't really use that word that much. I've heard of it. It's not part of my active vocabulary, but I appreciate that point, philosophy. I'm going to look into it after I'm done with this live. DJ said the word you're looking for is racist. No, I don't think so. What was I talking about? DJ said, I don't consider someone's personal perspective to detract from their knowledge or experience. Right, and it should not. Koya said, liberals are white supremacists too. That's correct. Some of them can be. Not all of them, but some of them can be. Hugo said, why cheer for your own exploitation? What are you referring to? Hugo Scavez, what are you referring to? DJ Blockchain said, what constitutes a conservative worldview? Well, simply conserving things. So that's the reason why they call it liberals and conservatives. So a liberal is very liberal and I'm being very general in saying this. Liberal means whatever way you want to think and whatever way you want to act, go ahead and do it. We are liberally allowing you to be and do whatever you want. That's what liberal means. Conservative means we have certain values and ways of looking at things and ways of doing things. We want to conserve those values and kind of keep it where it's at. So when I say liberal and conservative, I'm really referring to the sides politically. But if you're asking what the actual terms mean, that's in general what I mean when I say liberal and conservative views. A liberal view is I'm wide open to pretty much anything. So now when you see Mike come to school on Friday, then he comes to school on Monday, he's Michelle, that's a liberal worldview that allowed that to happen. Liberal view is just going to allow you. You were a boy, now you're a girl. That's liberal. Conservative is, okay, we're conserving the principle that if you're born this way, you will stay this way. And therefore, you, Mike, cannot become Michelle. That's a conservative view because we're conserving what's there. And I'm the type of person that when I talk about the things that I talk about, and this has nothing to do with politics, standards, principles, parameters, discipline. When I talk about those kind of things, these things are by definition conservative principles. They're conservative principles because it forces you to conserve what's already existing. They're conservative ways of looking at the world. Even though I am not a political conservative, many of the things that I push out are conservative ways of looking at life, period, not speaking politically. So this is why I get people who guess that I'm MAGA or conservative or Republican, not because I actually am, but because the things that my brand and my business and me personally, what I stand on, they are about conserving things. And discipline is a foundation of success. Discipline is a conservative way of looking at life, period. Whereas not being disciplined, do what you want to do, kind of be free spirit and live how you want to live. Those are liberal ways of looking at life. It's just how it is. And the law of entropy, there's a scientific law, says anything left to its own devices to do what it wants to do moves into a state of disorder and chaos. Now let's look at America right now. Are we in a state of disorder and chaos, or were we moving there very rapidly before November 5th? Yes, we were moving in a state of disorder and chaos, where you have a boy can decide to be a girl and a girl can decide to be a boy. And you have politicians going to the Capitol Hill and getting in front of cameras and defending it. Is that not disorder and chaos? That's disorder and chaos. That is the law of entropy come to life. That is a liberal way of looking at life, that a boy can become a girl and then he can go play in the girls' sports. And he can use the girls' bathroom, and you got to put tampons in the boys' bathroom because somebody who might be menstruating might go in the bathroom. That's ridiculous. Those are liberal outcomes. That kind of stuff only happens when you are very liberal in the way that life is lived. And for me to come out and say that's bullshit, if that makes me a conservative, then I do not mind the title. That's ridiculous. And the fact that there are a bunch of people who agree with me, but they wouldn't say it out loud, that is a reflection of liberalism. The fact that you won't even say it out loud, because if you say it out loud, you'll lose your job or you'll get fired or you'll get blocked from your social group. That's ridiculous. So anyway, back to where we were in the comments. Miss Sis, good morning. So you enjoy Candace Owens? Yeah, me too. Am I familiar with humanism? No, I'm not. I don't even know if I've ever even heard that term. No, I'm not familiar with it. Mrs. says, it's all fun and games until someone identifies a 14-year-old, then yeah, that's part of it. So philosophy, you're living up to your name with these philosophical terms you're bringing up. I appreciate it. So DJ Blockchain, hopefully that answers your question. Hugo says, millionaires run these corporations and are very conservative. PR is performative. Yes, I agree with you that many corporations are conservatively owned. I do agree with that. Now, sometimes they put someone with a liberal worldview in a position of influence in the organization, but the ownership is and has always been conservative. You're right about that. Warrants Tilliams. I just broke it down. So I answered your question before you even asked it. Let's see. Hugo said, Barry, a third of voters voted for Trump. Clinton beat Trump by more votes than he beat Kamala by. Well, you're talking about... Well, first of all, barely a third of voters voted for Trump. Well, of the voting bloc, more than half voted for Trump 2 out of 3 times officially. And you're saying Clinton beat Trump. Clinton beat Trump in the popular vote, but that's not how you win an election, Hugo. So you're bringing up a point that is irrelevant. Because Hillary winning the popular vote is not how you win the election. The history books 300 years from now is going to say Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. That's what the history books will say. Now, the fact that she won the popular vote is a moral victory, and moral victories do not matter in the real world. What matters is the actual victory. D said, conservatives these days are fake conservatives. Not all of them. I agree that there are some, but not all of them. Hugo said you can't keep it real and be conservative, period. Well, you can. The thing is, there's a penalty for doing so. There's a cost for doing so. So Hugo, you can keep it real and be conservative. The challenge is there's a cost that comes with it, and many people don't want to pay that cost. So they either keep quiet or they become liberal. That's what happens with most people. D said more than half the country did not vote for him. Of the voters, they did. I'm talking about the people who actually voted. Of the voters, Donald Trump won more than half of the voters' votes. Right? That's just a statistical fact. So any of you who want to split hairs and say, oh, well, more than half the country because it's 300 million people and you only got this many votes, so you all get the point. All right? Let's not play games here. Let's not dumb down the conversation just so you can find something negative to say about Donald Trump. This is exactly what I mean. People just want to dumb down the conversations. You can say something negative about Donald Trump because it appeases your feelings and your emotions. Let it go. It's over. He won 2 months ago. It was over. Sworn in as president again. It's over. Let it go. Okay. This whole arguments about how many votes he got. It's over. Okay. Everybody heard me. It's over. He's the president for the next 4 years. Okay. In 2028, you can vote for somebody else. Let's see. Someone said Trump barely got a third of voter support due to low turnout. Again, we're talking about the people who actually voted. Please let this go. I'm not reading any more comments about how many votes anybody got. We all know the outcomes. Joe Byron said, seems like liberal views are driven by emotions. Yes, that's what liberalism is about. Liberal means do what you feel like doing. That's what it is. Conservative is we're conserving the way things go, regardless of how you feel. Now, again, these are my definitions of these terms. You ask 10 different people what these terms mean, you're going to get 10 different answers. But liberalism is about doing what you feel. Do what thou wilt. That's what liberalism is. Again, how did Mike turn into Michelle and people are actually co-signing this? How did that happen? 20 years ago, Mike decided he was Michelle. He would get laughed out of the room. Now you get fired if you don't agree with it. Tell me what happened. Liberalism took over Western society, not just America either. Let's see. Dan Bongino, I've heard of him too. Yes, I haven't listened to his stuff a lot. Tucker, I've listened to. Bongino, I've heard other people have suggested him as well. Yes, I'm on YouTube. I'm simulcasting on YouTube. Shout out to people watching me on YouTube right now. I'm on YouTube, LinkedIn, Rumble, X, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok all at the same time. So someone's saying Joe is libertarian. Okay, that makes sense. I have some libertarian friends down here in Miami. They tell me that I'm libertarian. But when I do these lives, people tend to think that I'm conservative because usually I'm talking about some conservative topic because that gets the attention. And if I talk objectively about anything conservative or Trump or Republican, people assume that I'm defending them. I'm not defending them. I'm just defending logic and objectivity. And if being logical and objective makes me conservative, my question is, what does that say about the Democrats? What does that say about the liberals if being logical and objective means people assume that you're a conservative? That means that you can't be logical and objective and be a liberal at the same time. That's what it says to me by deductive reasoning. But you tell me what you think. Carol says, haven't heard any right-wingers say anything logical that you say KKK are not logical. Okay. Carol, what are you talking about? KB said Kamala too busy with Beyonce and J-Lo. Well, she's going to have plenty of time on her hands starting on Monday. Now, Millie Ramirez says, host, she wasn't going to win even if she was on Joe Rogan. Yeah, I understand that, Millie. I think going on Joe Rogan might have made the situation worse for her. This is probably why she didn't do it. But at the same time, I think the only chance she would have had is to go on Joe Rogan. I think she should have did it. And if she ends up burying herself on Rogan, go do it. But her not going on there put her in a bad position. That's how I feel, because it seemed like she was avoiding any conversation that she couldn't control. And I think that hurt her. DJ Sell, Bureau of Land Management. Oh, so you're saying they just hijacked the acronym BLM. Okay, you're not talking about the actual organization BLM. I get it. I get what you're saying. Dan said, Kevin Owens is a college dropout, self-hater. You mean Candace Owens? Oh, you're saying Candace Owens is a college dropout, first thing, self-hater of her pigmentation. So let's address that. So I'm glad you brought this up. First of all, someone dropping out of college, so what? So what? They dropped out of college. Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, a lot of people dropped out of college and they became extremely successful. So calling someone a college dropout as if that's some type of Kanye West, as if that's some type of negative point is not a point at all. And there's a bunch of people who didn't even go to college and they're successful. There's a bunch of people who went to college who are still paying back student loans, working at fucking Starbucks. So your college experience, graduate, not graduate, high GPA, low GPA, that is completely irrelevant to your success as an adult. What you did in college, completely irrelevant. So let's drop that point. And then you said she's a self-hater of her pigmentation. So you sound like you're a white guy, Dan, talking about what a black person is supposed to believe just because they're black. Completely rejected. You're talking to a black person. A white person is unqualified to tell a black person what they're supposed to think or how they're supposed to feel just based on the pigmentation of their skin. Let me ask you a question, Dan. Have you ever had a black person tell you what you're supposed to think because you're white? Probably not, right? Because we don't even talk like that. So you're unqualified to make that comment. And I'm assuming that you're white because I never hear a black person talk like this. Self-hater of her pigmentation. You sound like a white person making that comment. Mr. SJES says, I love Candace and I'm black. LOL. I'm a fan of Candace too, and I'm black. Candace has a lot of black fans. It's just a lot of black fans of Candace won't say it out loud because they're going to get blowback from other black people for admitting that they like Candace Owens. And as an example, what I just showed you here, you even get white people trying to tell you what you're supposed to think because you're black. It's one of the most ridiculous and condescending things for a white person to tell a black person how they're supposed to think or feel just because they're black. Again, I've never heard a black person tell a white person what they're supposed to think, but I hear white people doing it often to black people. Chan the man said, liberals foster innovation, conservatives want to stay in the Stone Age. Well, if you were to take them to their absolutes of the way I described it, I get what you're saying, but is that what's actually happening? Is that what's actually happening, Chan the man? Who are the richest people that we know of in the United States of America? Let's look it up. Let's ask ChatGPT. And let's see if that's actually true. And this is anecdotal, but let's see. Who are the 10 richest people in the United States? And let's see what ChatGPT tells us. Again, this is ChatGPT. So as of January 2025, number one richest person in America is Elon Musk. What side is he on, liberal or conservative? Number two, Jeff Bezos. And we know that he just gave $40 million through Amazon to Melania Trump for a documentary. So what side is he on, liberal or conservative? Number three, Mark Zuckerberg. He just announced that they're no longer going to be doing fact checking, but now community notes. And we know that he donated millions of dollars to the Trump campaign. So what side is he on, liberal or conservative? So your argument is not really standing up too much here, Chan the man. The top three richest people in America all seem to be leaning conservatively. And these people are all innovators who created businesses. So your point doesn't quite stand up to that anecdotal information that I just shared there. Now, I know it's anecdotal, but at the same time, you get it. Dan said, when you gave your definition of hypocrite, you're right, you're wrong. Everybody's a hypocrite, depending on the way you want to use the term. If you want to use the term, down to the letter, every human being is a hypocrite because all of us are going to have different views 10 years from now than we have today. So technically, you can call everybody a hypocrite if you want to use it that way. User said, why would anyone care about what someone does with their body? Well, that's a good question that people use to disarm the argument against men becoming women. One thing I would say is, why do you have this random screen name here instead of your actual name? And another thing, and it's often people who are anonymous making these kind of comments. And the other reason is because it influences everybody else. It has influence on others. And if you want to conserve principles, then you conserve principles. It'd be like if someone broke into my next door neighbor's house and I said something about it, and the robber said, well, why do you care what's happening to somebody else's house? I care because if we make it okay for you to break into that house, then it might be okay to break into my house. So even though it doesn't directly involve me, I'm deciding to get myself involved because I'm looking to uphold the standards and the parameters of the community, even though what happened in the community does not directly affect me right now. Because if I let that one go, then the next one might be hitting me. So that's one reason. And there are 100 other arguments people could give, but I just gave you one. Dan said, the things you mentioned cannot be divorced from politics. Fine. I didn't say they need to be. User said, live how you want to live is bad? No, false question. That's a straw man question, but I'll answer what you're actually trying to say, which is someone living how they want to live, depending on what that is, can be bad and it can be challenged. It is open to challenge. So living how you want to live means you want to go get a house on the lake and you want to ride in your boat every day and fish and not bother anybody. If that's how you want to live, is that bad? No. But if living how you want to live means you want to go rob people and break into houses and steal stuff, is that bad? Yes. So if we take it to the extremes, it can be bad. It depends on what it is. So your question is poorly formatted. I get what you're trying to do there, but you could do better than that. Mo Lisa said, I agree with what you're saying. Thank you. Brandon Tessner got the number 3 badge. Congrats. Rogue said, free will is what troubles you and conservatives like you. Well, it depends on how people are using free will, Rogue One. Would you agree? If someone uses their free will to rob your grandmother, would you be okay with free will? So you got to be careful how you're throwing around these terms. Free will sounds good until someone misuses it and it affects you. Then you wouldn't be so happy with free will. If someone robbed your grandmother and beat her up, would you be okay with them using their free will? So these blanket terms sound good until you realize how people might use them. Mossy Pockets said, put on the suit and then spew hate. Cool. Who am I hating? April Hill said, I love your point of view. Thank you. Me too. Vinny Torres says, have you heard of The End of Race Politics by Coleman Hughes? I've heard Coleman Hughes talk a few times. I like his approach generally. I don't listen to him all the time, but I think I read one of his books already. That might have been the one that I read. He has more than one book, doesn't he? I think I read one of his books. If he has, I think I read at least one, if he has more than one. Mossy said, doesn't mean you're conservative, it means you're a bigot with hate in your heart. No, I'm not a conservative. And on certain topics, I am a bigot. On certain topics, I am a proud bigot. A boy cannot become a girl. So if that makes me a bigot, okay, I'm a bigot. I accept it. I accept the label. All right, let's see. DJ said, I know very little about politics, but I understand that literal politics are soft Satanism. Well, that's one way of looking at it. And you're entitled to that opinion. Eric said, this is my favorite hour, regardless of what you say. You make me think. Well, thank you. That's one of my aims and one of my skills. So thank you. Conservative politics, DJ says, seems to be more based on mutual imprecation. What does that term mean? Dan says, let's talk facts. 10 million Americans did not vote. Very important. 90% Democrats. I don't understand exactly what you're saying and why that matters. What does that have to do with the conversation? We already know the outcome. We know who won 2016. We know who won 2020. We know who won 2024. Why are people still talking about how many people voted and who got whatever number of votes? Doesn't matter. The outcome is the outcome. Nut Squawk said, that's not democracy then. She won the popular vote of the country. The people spoke. Land can't vote. I don't think any land voted. People voted. The Electoral College determines the outcome. Let me ask you a question. Did Hillary know that the outcome is based not on the popular vote, but on the Electoral College? I think she knew that, right? Okay, so we can't go and say, well, she got more of the popular vote, so that means she's actually the winner. But we know the rules. The rules are, and again, I come from the sports world. In sports, you know the rules up front. So before the game begins, everybody knows the rules, right? Okay, so the rule is whoever gets the most electoral votes wins. Not whoever gets the most popular votes, whoever gets the most electoral votes. Hillary got the most popular votes. She did not get the most electoral votes. So who's the winner? Hillary or Trump? Trump. All right, that's the rules. Everybody knew the rules before the game began. So this revisionist history, she got more votes. So that means, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's a moral victory. Moral victories are for losers. Only losers talk about moral victories because they didn't win the actual game. So they try to find a different way to claim that they won. Let's see. So I need y'all to come with some better quality questions here. CCRX says, conservatives talk about ethics and principles, but in actuality, really, they have no morals. Well, people, if you swapped out conservatives and liberals in that very sentence there, CCRX, then a bunch of people on the other side of the conversation would say the exact same thing. They say the same thing about liberals. So there's not really, there's nothing there. Sean said, Democrats are incompetent. Well, there are Democrats who would say the Republicans are incompetent. So, I mean, again, y'all got to give me a little bit more substance in these comments. A.O. Buchanan, are you conserving the state of ignorance you reside in? Is that your conservatism? What did I get wrong? A.O. Buchanan, ignorance means to not know something. What am I talking about that I don't know? Now, there may be things I'm not talking about that I don't know. I'll accept that. But what am I talking about that I don't know? Please tell me. And those of you with screen names with no actual name, I'm not reading any more of your comments. You got to actually give me a screen name if I'm going to read your comment. Vinny said, Malcolm X warned everyone about the white liberal decades ago. Listen to him. He's not wrong. Yes, he was 100% correct. And everything he said 60 years ago was true. That is correct. Mossy said, so you're in an echo chamber. Cool. Obviously, I'm not. There's a bunch of people disagreeing with me in the comments. How is it an echo chamber when I'm actually reading the comments of people who are disagreeing with me? How is this an echo chamber? Sean says, because Dems are dumb. Well, Dems say that Republicans are dumb. So, I mean, what are you actually saying there? Let's see, where am I? Sarah said, if you make sense and spit facts, you're automatically conservative. That seems to be the way it is going. But let's keep going. April Hill, my YouTube link is in my bio on TikTok. Just go to my profile, you'll see the link. And just look up my name, Dre Baldwin, and it's YouTube / at Dre B, DREB, the letter B. Brings up my YouTube channel, DREB. My first name is Dre, my last name is Baldwin. So YouTube / then put the little @ sign and Dre B, my channel will come up. Mossy said, why are conservatives obsessed with anything but policy? Well, I'm not a conservative, so I can't answer that question. You asked me a question I can't answer. And it's a false question anyway, but I still can't answer it. So Satine says she always had time on her hands. This administration got paid to do nothing but treason. Okay, you say so. Someone said Chlamydia Harris talks in word salad. Well, she did often talk in word salads. That part I will agree with. CCRX said you never had a president that objectively lies as much as Trump. I disagree with that. I think they all lie the exact same amount. It just sounds different. When Trump says what he says, he is more overt, whereas others, let's say like Barack Obama, are more smooth with it, but they're both lying. They just lie, and Trump lies in a very gruff and blunt way when he does say something that's not true. Barack Obama did it in a very smooth way, so it didn't feel like he was lying, but he was. They all lie in equal amount. So to say that Trump lies more than anybody else is nonsense. And there are many more people trying to find a lie when Trump talks than there were people trying to find a lie when Obama spoke. So when Obama talked, you didn't have 10,000 people trying to find a lie and to use it against him. But when Trump talks, you got 50,000 people trying to find a lie and use it against him. So we have to consider all of that when you consider what you know or what you've heard or what quote unquote fact checks. Was there fact checking when Obama was president? I never heard of it. I didn't hear a fact check until Trump came around because they were looking for anything they could use to try to make him look bad, and it still didn't work. And again, this is the failure of the mainstream media. They did all of that, and it still failed. Piano says, why does it matter? Why not give money to California? I don't know what you're talking about. Ryan said, you're not being academically honest if you claim Bezos and Zuckerberg are conservative. I didn't say they are conservative. I said, looking at their recent actions, their actions lean conservative. Bezos did a deal with Melania Trump. Zuckerberg gave money to the Trump campaign. Now, there's a hustle in giving money to campaigns when you have as much as those guys have, because you can give money to both sides, and whichever side wins, now you got favored with that side. I talked about that yesterday in detail, Ryan. So if you weren't here yesterday, I talked about that already. So some of you are bringing up things that I've discussed in the past. You got to catch my old streams. They're all on YouTube. Tammy said, my son went to college with Jeff Bezos' son. All right, that's great. What school? What college was that? Rose said they're buying their graces again after trying to take him down. I agree. Rose for Truth, I 100% agree. Yes, that is what they're doing. That's the hustle. That's what you got to do. Jeff, no one said keep scoring these Democrat weaklings. Yeah. Facebook is owned by the DOD, all Silicon Valley. I've heard that. I've heard people say things that equate to that. Now, I understand your position. I can't argue it because I don't know much about that. Enrique said these billionaires betting on the right does not mean they believe it. I agree. I just said that. So we're on the same page here. I talked about this yesterday, by the way. Any of you listening, me saying that these people are leaning right now to the right does not mean they couldn't lean back to the left in 4 years. I 100% agree with that. I said that yesterday. Many of you were not here yesterday, but I said that yesterday. Lisa Michaels said they don't care about you. Yeah, I don't think they care about any of us. And I did a whole live in November of last year. The live was called Who to Vote For in 2024. The whole live was about who to vote for. And I explained to everybody why you should not be so emotionally invested in either side politically, because ultimately The person most responsible for your ultimate success is going to be yourself. So whenever I say anything about conservatives and I appear to be defending them, I get comments like this one, Lisa Michaels, who said, well, they don't care about you, or you'll never be on Trump's team. You're not one of them. They're not going to save you, et cetera, et cetera. Let me ask you a question. What have the liberals done for any of you in the last 60 years? People only make that comment about conservatives, but they don't make the comment about the liberals. What have they done? They haven't done anything. Politicians are not here to save you. I can talk about that because I can objectively, emotionally detach myself from either side emotionally. I have no emotional engagement in either political outcome, any political outcome. If Kamala won, I would still be doing these lives and talking about the same things. Well, actually, I'd be talking about different things because it'd be different news items. But I'm not emotionally engaged in any of this. So I'm not expecting a politician to do anything for me. If you are, you're a fool. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, they're not going to do anything for you. You may be happy about it and you may like what they're doing and you will use what they do for your own purposes. I'm doing it right now. I'm using things that happen politically for my own purposes of doing these live streams. I can promote myself by talking about them, but I'm not expecting them to do anything for me. I never have and I never will. So any of you who is emotionally bought to anything that happens politically, you're the one who's getting played. Not them. They're playing you. Stacey says an excellent way to put it into perspective. Thank you. Let's see. Meme says, what's your opinion what's going on in Oklahoma with the, I don't know what's going on, so I don't have an opinion. There should only be true constitution once you follow the true intent of founders. Well, yeah, you might have to go back 150 years to get that, to find that. Someone said, have you read Buying Coke? No, I've never heard of that. Never heard of him or that. Who has ever said Hillary won? Well, a lot of people have said that as a cope because they don't like Trump. It's not about Hillary. Hillary ain't got that many fans. Trump just has a lot of enemies. That's really what it is. Maverick69 says, thank you for the common sense. Thank you. April said, a lot of things never think of. I'm definitely liberal, but I think of how free can be used. I don't know what you mean. DJ said, mutual imprecation is committing a corrupt or wicked act to ensure solidarity. Okay, I never heard of that before. NL said, the popular vote always leads to dictators and tyranny, which is why we have the Electoral College. That's one argument for it. I get it. Mr. Flipper, you asked the same question like 5 times. Don't spam my comments. So my sport was basketball. Rose 4 True said, first time here, where did I land? I would love to ask a question. Go ahead. Ask the question. Jan Jr. said, are you fighting to help the South to rise again? What does that even mean? I don't know what you're talking about. Help the South? What South? South America? The southern part of America? What are you talking about? Let's see. Stephanie Cross said, it comes down to who is less corrupt. Money and power is running the DC swamp. That is true. Yes. It doesn't matter what side they're on. I'm reading the comments, but y'all are posting comments. I'm reading comments that already got posted. So I'm not at the same pace as y'all. So don't post the same thing 10 times. I'll see it when I scroll through it. Democratic policies or those policies have always led to destroy societies and nations. That's what some people say. Some people say that. I can't 100% go with that, though. Both sides have done things that mess things up. Harry said, today's liberals are an existential threat to the existence of Western civilization. There is a strong argument for that, Harry. I can't push back on that. There is a strong argument for that. I might do a whole live talking about that one day. Me and Lisa said, why don't you vote? This is how government is supposed to work. Who said that I didn't vote? I did a whole live telling you who to vote for, and I explained it in detail, and I took 2 hours explaining it. Look it up on YouTube. Sarah Archer said, none of these politicians know what they're voting for. Big corporations run this nation. I think the politicians know that. Vinny said, if you could recommend just one book for everyone to read, what would it be? That depends heavily on the subject. You give me a topic, then I can recommend a book. But there are millions of books out there, literally millions of books. So not everybody's interested in the same thing. Satine said, appreciate your live. Knowledge is important. I agree. Thank you. Oh, the college was MIT? Okay. Allowing propaganda to the public, DJ said, okay, I didn't know about that. So I'll take your word for it. I can't co-sign it because I don't know if it's actually true. I'm just going off what you said in the comment, but I'm assuming you're telling the truth. Miguel said, I appreciate your content. You're a very articulate person. Thank you again for your words. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you for joining us. I was in healthcare and a tax organization for having great health insurance. Yeah, I've heard of that. O-Dog on YouTube said, news can come from anywhere, but it takes skill to look at something and extract what's useful. Exactly. So ESPN tells you that it's yes, I agree with that. I agree with that perspective. Let's see. On Instagram, Phil said, to be fair, the Republicans created a better story around their message. Democrats didn't, just being objective as someone who voted Green last year. Well, I think it was the quality of the candidates, I think, played the biggest role last year. I think Kamala was just ridiculously bad. That's what I think. Had they had someone who was just okay, it would have been a closer competition. Dylan said, I used to watch your old hoop videos on YouTube back in the day. Got me working on my game ever since. That's what's up. Said Trump for sure do a better job preventing WW3. Yes, I think he would too. I have to agree with that. Let's see. I'm on the same time every day. Yes, 8 a.m. Eastern is when I start these lives. 8 a.m. Eastern is when I do my lives, Monday through Friday, by the way. I should have said that at the beginning. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern. If you like what you're hearing here today, 8 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, I do these live streams talking about a current event or some social issue topic. I start at 8. I usually go to sometimes 9 or 10, depending on the quality of the comments. So today I'm just reading comments and I'm reading. So what do you think about the way the government has handled the Cali compared to North Carolina? I don't know how much we can put on the government as a whole, federal versus the state level, and they're two completely different situations. So that's what I would say about that. Let me see. A lot of people read Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington. Maybe they learned something. Well, if they're interested. The thing is, you can't make people read a book. And first of all, you got to pick out the people who actually read, which is not everybody. Then you got to find a topic they'd be interested in. So, Vinny, I wouldn't stake my, I wouldn't hitch my wagon to that idea of getting people to read a book. Most people don't read. So I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I wouldn't bet on that. Bulletproof Warrior says voting means begging someone else to think for you. No, not necessarily. I get the directionally what you mean, but you can still vote and at the same time be detached from thinking they're going to do anything for you. But you can still vote to make sure that your voice is heard and maybe push things in the direction you want them to go. DJ said, which of your books would you recommend for someone in business? I don't follow sports or politics. I would recommend you read my book, Work on Your Game. This book right here. You can get it at workonyourgamebook.com. Work on Your Game, and then just the word book.com. So you can get a copy of that book. And we have book funnels. So I've written 35 books. So often you get a book from me, I'll offer you more books. And inside of the funnel, before you check out, we'll offer you more books. Think Globally said, have you not heard of the Southern Strategy? Why are you asking that? I didn't say anything about the Southern Strategy. Why are you asking if I've heard of it? The topic here today is not that. Red said, thank you for speaking truth. You're welcome. Let's see. April said, I never think about how free will can be used both ways. I'm definitely do what you will person. Well, every human is a do what you will person. The point is, speaking on the high level of do what you will means whatever you feel like, just do it. Again, when you take it to the extreme of being liberal, it means whatever you feel like doing, just do it and don't even think twice about whether it makes sense. Great Days Ahead said, do you ever think about being a lawyer? Yes, I thought about it, and the answer is no. First of all, you have to go to law school. Secondly, I've heard enough from people who are actual lawyers what it's actually like, and no, I would never become a lawyer. I just play one on the internet. So that's the closest I'll come to being a lawyer, is playing a lawyer on the internet like I'm doing now. I've recorded a couple episodes of my podcast, as a matter of fact, where I talk about how to be a lawyer on the internet. And it's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek thing, but so many people ask me when I do these lives if I'm a lawyer that I went and made that episode. It didn't come out yet. It'll come out in about a month. That's 6 a.m. your time? Yeah, so wake up early, AZ Mom, be here, 8 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. April said, I assume people use free will honestly. Most people do. Most people are generally good people, but some people use free will in a negative way. So that's why you got to protect yourself against those people. Tammy said, MIT is very liberal. I would think so. Vinny said, work on your game would have been a great answer to your question about one book to read. Well, assuming someone actually wants to work on their game, Vinny. Not everybody wants to work on their game. So again, depends on who you're talking to. Now for you, yes, but not for everybody. Bulletproof said, I'll never be a lawyer. I have studied it since 2004. That's a lot of studying. Bulletproof was 20 years of study. You probably know everything. Someone asked, who's the GOAT, Jordan or LeBron? Jordan. DJ said, appreciate it. I'll pick it up and probably catch you on YouTube since this is possibly going away. Yeah, so it's actually right after 10 o'clock. So we're going to wrap this one up, everybody. I do these live streams Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern. I usually talk about some type of current event, something that's in the news. Good news for people like me and you is that Donald Trump is about to get sworn in as president again. And Donald Trump is a lightning rod for conversation. That's good for me. It's better that he won than Kamala won just for this alone, because talking about Trump draws attention, and I am going to milk Donald Trump for all the attention that he draws by talking about him. So I will be talking about Donald Trump. I will be talking about MAGA. I will be talking about things happening in politics as I see them and subjects that I want to discuss. So I'm not going to discuss everything that happens in politics because I don't pay attention to everything. It is not my full-time job to follow the news and politics. I'll talk about things from the perspective that I see them and the angles in which I would like to approach them. So if I don't talk about something that you think I should, you can suggest it, but if I'm not interested, I'm not going to talk about it. But I will be talking about Trump a lot. I will tell you today is Wednesday, right? So tomorrow's Thursday. We'll be live tomorrow and the next day. Don't know what the topic is going to be just yet. I will tell you that on Monday, that's the day that Trump gets sworn in as president again. I will be talking about Donald Trump's second round as president. That is guaranteed happening on Monday, 8 a.m. Tomorrow and Friday, don't know yet, to be determined. I got a whole list of subjects. I don't just come up out of nowhere and decide my topic. I prepare ahead of time before I get on this camera and talk to you all. So I already know what's coming before I get on here. But something might happen today that I end up talking about tomorrow. So right now, I can't promise you exactly what the topic is unless it's something that is guaranteed to happen, like Trump's inauguration. Guaranteed I'm going to be talking about that on Monday. But tomorrow and Friday, we'll see. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. My YouTube is YouTube/@DreB, DRE, the letter B. Or just look my name up, Dre Baldwin on YouTube. I got 14,000 videos on YouTube. I'm very easy to find. I've been on there for a very long time. If you want to work with me directly, have me as your coach, get into one of our coaching programs. Have me as a consultant or a trainer for your business or your team. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. That link is also in my bio on whatever app you are watching me on right now. And as per usual, after sitting here for 2 hours, those of you who don't know me, I wake up early in the morning. I go work out first thing in the morning. So by the time you see this, I already worked out and I drank a lot of water. I've been sitting here for 2 hours talking to y'all, which means I need to go to the bathroom. So everybody have a great day. I will see you all tomorrow. Work on your game. We out here.